Hi, my name's Elissa Cox, and I am showing here at Slocumb Galleries, and my show is called Rupture. A few things. It's an installation work. I use multiple media, everything from glitter to beads to paper mache is how I make it. But my ideas come from many different areas. I'm really interested in the way the viewers can relate to my work and how they can walk around it. I like the idea that the work comes right in front of their face and you have to duck in and out of it. And so you have this bodily reaction to the work already, physically. And that's part of my interest, is how my work relates to the human as a viewer, because a lot of my imagery comes from the human body. I find the insides of humans, the intestines and guttural anatomy, extremely interesting and intricate, and I want to show how beautiful that is in some ways. And so I use a lot of beads and glitter and bright colors and gold to accentuate that. And so a lot of my work sometimes is sort of off-putting because of the latex I use and stuff like that. It becomes very fleshy. And so I like the idea of viewers not knowing whether they like the work or not, of a shifting of aesthetics. And for instance, I enjoy that when people come to my work, they get real close because they want to see all the texture, but then they're kind of the shifting of aesthetics of, do I like it or not like it? And I like putting people in that position. My audience, I want my audience to be a broad range. I really make my work so that my audience can relate to it, from a young child of 5 all the way to someone elderly, to the most academic, to the most individuals that have no idea about work. And I'm really trying to put them into a setting so that they can question. They can question what it is, putting them in a different place, a different world, we'll say it, because becomes very fantasy and dreamlike. And so I want to put my viewers in that sort of situation of a dreamlike setting, and also the relationship of how they move around the piece. So when I start making my work, I think of a lot of different things. Like, I do a lot of reading. I look at everything from Vogue to Martha Stewart, and I relate that all. Like, when I was a kid, I grew up running home not to watch Little House on the Prairie, but to watch Martha Stewart shows, because I loved the way she would decorate a cake. And the decorations that went into it were so intense, and it was like, beating. It was like, how many flowers could she fit onto a cake? And I find that intricacy of that, like a body, that how the insides of us are made. And I find, okay, so I'm comparing Martha Stewart to the inside of her bodies and like intestines and stuff. But I think that's a really interesting comparison of that, the sickly sweet tiered cake with all the stuff on it, layers and layers of information, just like our bodies do. And like the world where those two mesh together, the beauty and the grotesque coming together for a fun fantasy little dream experiment that I try to create with my work. Another great inspiration is things like novels by C.S. Lewis, like The Secret Garden, the transportation of going from one world into a different reality, of stepping over a threshold into something else. And so when you're going between the two galleries, I really want one to be one world and then it exploding into a different area. So I have pods in the other gallery, and then how they come, and it's like they're bursting open. And what comes from like these small pods, what's inside of them, and what are they going to grow into? And I like that questioning of, yes, everything's a recognizable material, but it's the lending to fantasy. It's like when we were kids and we had washer boxes, and they all of a sudden became our toy house. But it wasn't a house, we suspended our disbelief into something like that. So I use these acrylic beads, which everyone recognizes, and you see them right away as the cheap bead at the hobby store. But in a mass quantity of a couple 100,000, they become a life on its own. And I like that exuberance of this energy that I want my work to create. I work really quickly, I work fast, and I want that energy and motion to be there. So lots of texture. I choose materials based upon their texture. I use everything from dirty sofa foams to the foam to the latex, but I choose it on its texture and the visual material feel it has. Artistic influences, I have many. Everything from Matthew Barney and how he creates, of course, his own worlds, to Tim Burton, who directs wonderful movies that suspend the disbelief of, like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, to James and the Giant Peach, and how people go from one reality to the next real quick. My favorite being Edward Scissorhands, and how you go from the suburban up to his magical forest in his castle. And then it's always the walking over into something. And so I'm hoping I can do more of that with my installations of walking from a hallway and coming in and suspending a disbelief. Ava Hess, Kiki Smith, Liza Liu, those are just a few. Laura Owens, a painter who's fabulous. Those are some of the artists that I've been looking at. But I try to gain my influences not just from the art world. I think a lot of times artists, and especially young students, can get so influenced by just looking at art all the time instead of looking what's around them. And like I've said, Martha Stewart to Vogue magazine to just flowers in nature to the way sea anemone grows and the clownfish are in between it. All those influences are hugely important. I think a lot of times for artists, what they're drawn most to is how they grew up and where they grew up. I grew up in a small rural town of Minnesota where I have 4 brothers. I was the only girl. And so my little make-believe world was my room, because being the only girl in a family, I had my own room. And so when I would go down to my room, all of a sudden I was the only person in it, and my room became my sanctuary or my make-believe world with my dolls or My Little Ponies or something like that. And you could suspend that disbelief into that room, and then I'd walk out of my room and I'd be back into the land of having 4 brothers. So that was hugely influential. And growing up in the country of rural Minnesota, you have to kind of make up a lot of stuff all the time and try to pretend that you are in a different forest or in the land instead of just having a cornfield right next to you. You have to suspend the disbelief of what's it like to be encapsulated within a different environment. And so I did a lot of reading as a child and playing outside with my brothers, of course, and stuff like that. My education started off a little different. I graduated from a small high school, 80 people, the place where you knew everyone. And then right after high school, I traveled to New Zealand for a full year. And I was secluded in this wonderful subtropical country for a full year, living with all these host families, experiencing some of the greatest things in the world. And so that was my full year down there. And then I started my undergraduate education at the University of Minnesota, where I had no desire to be an artist. I never wanted to be an artist. I always did art. I was always taking art classes, but I never thought I'd make a career out of it or a future. So I went to the University of Minnesota and had every major except art until I finally took my first ceramic class and fell in love, and voila, 10 years of education later, that was my path I decided to take. So my art career started in ceramics, and I feel extremely fortunate that I started in ceramics because it really showed me a love of a material. I fell in love with clay, the way I could manipulate it, way I touched it and it would stay that way. And you could model it and you molded it, and it was great. And I was a sculptor right away. I was a figurative sculptor. And so that was my career at the U of M. I got a BFA and a BA in art history at the University of Minnesota. I then traveled, because I knew I wasn't quite ready for graduate school, I then traveled to the University of Colorado Boulder, and I had some strong female faculty that really influenced me. Jeannie Quinn and Kim Dickey were there, and they were hugely influential. And my work started shifting again. It got more decorative, more floral. I was highly influenced by the settings that European porcelain figurines would take on. Again, a suspension of disbelief, the idea that peasants were happy lovers that would sit on a grassy knoll in a little figurine stance. and it would be perfect and ideal, and everything was perfect. There was never any badness, there was never any breakups or hatred or anything like that. I was in love with these figurines, and so I started recreating those using my life. And so everything was very personal, autobiographical narrative of my figurines. And then, but they became more and more decorative to the point where once I started graduate school, I realized the figure wasn't the important part. The figure became my viewer. And so I consider the figure in my work now, the viewer, as they relate to my environments. And so I started realizing that clay was not doing what I needed it to do in my work, and I started looking at other materials that I could manipulate. So I went to wax, to foam, to cloth, to beads, to all these things that I could manipulate with my hands. And so I came into the sculpture world. We have to use those in quotes because of ceramics going to sculpture. I went to the sculpture world treating sculptural materials like I did clay. So I took metal and I treated it like clay. I took foam and I treated it like clay, the way I can manipulate it. And so I feel very fortunate. I started in ceramics and then have chosen different materials, which I think becomes a strong asset in my part. And so I found that the other materials just worked a lot better than clay because of the way I could make them, the lightness of them, and the more ephemeral objects became. So we're now in the second gallery of Slocumb Galleries. We're in the first one and then the second one. And it was a really great place to set up because you do have the two places with glass in between. So you're in one gallery and you can still see what it turns into. And I consider this kind of the first gallery, the first, like the beginning or the end. I mean, I don't put a lot of narrative in my work, but I like narrative to be built through audience members. Of like, the way I think of these is the spores and the pods and what could come from them, the idea of the imagination turning into a disbelief. And so coming in here and then seeing the mass, and there's still like these little wax spores, there's a few of them in the other gallery of remnants from it. And so I like that idea of the play between the two spaces. A lot of times as an artist you're given one big space and there's a go create in one giant space. And so this is a really great opportunity to have two rooms that kind of share and they play and they work off, that an audience member could come from one to the other and back and forth to see the relationships that I'm trying to create. The other really great thing about having a show here at East Tennessee State is the idea of all the students coming in. School starts in a week, and so they're going to come into my show, which I'm very excited about. I'm hoping that it acts not only as, you know, a great opening show for them to experience coming back from the first week of school, but ideas of possibilities of what art can do. Art does not need to sit on a pedestal or hang on a wall. It can lay on the floor. It can protrude from the wall. It can do all these different things. And art is becoming more and more interdisciplinary as it comes. And here I am a ceramic teacher. I teach ceramics. I've made ceramics all my life, and now I'm doing mixed media. And the idea of that interdisciplinary switch of where not being so media directed, but being interdisciplinary with all mediums. I've got fiber in here, I've got steel, I got latex, I got wax. All these different disciplines are coming in. So hopefully will be a jumping stone for students to see the way I work and maybe gain something from it, or let them show that work can be extremely experimental and can do anything. A lot of artists work this way, and hopefully now that a student has the ability then cross over to work really large instead of working small, or vice versa. Something I really enjoy with my work is it doesn't stick around. None of my materials are archival. They're all going to go away. So what I do is I show work for a little bit, or parts of works for a little bit, and then I decide it's time to retire that work, which doesn't usually take too long for me to turn it around. And what I'll do is I'll start cutting it apart. I recycle all my work. So my bigger pieces, I'll start cutting them apart with, tin snips to scissors to, and, a torch and everything else. And so it all gets cut apart. and turned into something else. And so I like the idea that my work becomes recyclable. And it's something that I want even to go further in the future, of using all recyclable materials, and the idea of finding stuff. I've started with foam. I go and I collect sofa cushions from a lot of college students, and I sit and twist them for hours to create a new form. And so I'm hoping my work even becomes more recyclable in such a nature of taking everyday objects and making new meanings upon them and putting them in a different context. So I'm not saving my works for a retrospective anytime soon. I'm hoping by the time I get to that age, I'll just have brand new work again. So I really like that freedom that it gives me to create a piece of work and to show it for a little bit and then turn it into something else. I never have any process. I never have any fear of cutting into a piece and changing it once I've made it. I think it's gratifying to cut it apart and turning it into another vision. In fact, that's how I build a lot, is I'll start building something and I don't like the way it looks, so I cut off a section, which is very ceramic. You don't like a section, you cut off the arm and you rebuild it. And so I work that way in my sculptures a lot too. So finishing up, as I'm looking at this work, it's always hard to digest work that you just finished and literally just get done installing. And so it takes a little bit, but it's been interesting setting it up, and especially, of course, like I've been saying, working with the two galleries and having the play between the two. And in the future, of course, all my work becomes very site-specific, so it depends upon the space every time I go into it and where I install. But I really do hope to use more alternative spaces, like store windows to hallways of schools to places where you find art you're not expecting to encounter it, and something different. And I like the unexpected nature that can happen maybe with my work, and finding it in different locations, stairwells to public buildings, so you name it. So who knows where you might find or come across my work in the future, which I hope will become many places. But that's the real joy of making my work. Everything's pure labor until it gets to the installation, and that's when I feel that I'm the true artist. Before that, it's a lot of labor and a lot of work, but it's the installing that is my work, and it's a lot of fun every time I do it, and different every time I do it.
Set for my accidental suicide, the kind when no one dies, no one next to surprise. And then you realize you're riding on the power of success, this heavy-handed metaphor. And I feel like you've been here before, cause you've been here before, and you've been here before. And then a word washed ashore, then a word washed ashore, then a word washed ashore. So vague, all along in the day. The whole board of trustees, all those Don Quixotes and the B-17s. And I swear this time, yeah this time, it blows back to the 70s. And this time, I'm playing Ride of the Valkyries with no semblance of grace, and they're acting on vagaries with the violent proclivities, and they're playing right, they're playing right, playing right, right to the Valkyries. Sylvain, 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 all along the day. Threaten to be a threat. Instead of thinking about my plan of attack, I think I'm gonna sack the whole board of trustees, all those Don Quixotes and the B-17s, and I swear this time the blow's back to the 70s. And this time they're playing right of the Valkyries with no semblance of gracery. Now they're acting on vagaries with the violent proclivities, and they're playing right, and playing right, they're playing right, and they're playing right, they're playing right, they're playing right, right of the Valkyries. You remind me of you, the way you shot right through and high. You broke my window glass fast, it happened so fast. I have to confess that I was impressed, that I was impressed, that despite all the mess and the broken glass, I was impressed. Here's where I disappeared, where I fell off a pier, and to be rescued out of wait, I watch water bugs skate as they draw figure eights, as they draw from the bottom of the lake as they draw. I watch waterboards skate as they draw. From the bottom of the lake, I watch the waterboards skate. Memories like mohair sweaters, stretching pills or distress letters. Moose's horns and figure eights, while plastic bags in search of mates. What suffocates lamb? Memory of garbage can, and memory of garbage can. But you can't be found when the bell rings. You weren't there that day for the naming of things. Naming of things, naming of things. When your home bell rings, day, you really didn't think it would get this bad. Hey, you feel like you're living in a Russian play, what seems like you made everybody mad. 'Cause you remind me of you when you shout through and broke my window glass, and it happened so fast. I have to confess, I was impressed, and I was impressed. Spot of a mess in the broken glass, I was impressed. You can't be found when the bell rings. You were there that day for the naming of things. Naming things, naming all things. And your home bell rings, and then your home bell rings. It's the naming of things, and naming of. I dreamed you were a cosmonaut of the space between our chairs. And I was a cartographer of the tangles in your hair. A song that silence brings. It's one that everybody knows. Oh, everybody knows the song that silence sings. And this glass in hand. Awkward pause, fatal flaw. Time, it's a crooked bow. Oh, time's a crooked bow. Time you need to long, too long. Out just like the flame. Grab hold of your bootstraps, and pull like hell. To gravity feels so free. I would let you go, as if you lack the proper chemicals to know how we felt the last time you let yourself fall this low. And 3 ACLs later, at the bottom of this gigantic crater, an armchair calls to you. Yeah, this armchair calls to you, and it says that someday we'll get back at them all. With a box and a pair of pliers, as ancient sea slows begin to crawl through the ragweed and barbed wire.